This is a pretty good turnout for a guy who spent 4 years on this campus and couldn't get a date. That's not bad. I'm glad that you've come out to spend a few minutes this morning. It's going to be a very informal session. I'm not going to bore you to tears. I don't have any magic pill that tells you how to be successful in broadcasting, but hopefully I can give you a few things that can help you whether you're pursuing a career in broadcasting or somewhere else. You know, one of the things that happens when you do what I do for a living is you become recognized, sometimes at the most inopportune moments and sometimes when you don't expect it. It kind of keeps you on your P's and Q's in terms of making sure that you treat people well, which you would hope to do anyway. But I landed in Birmingham last night and was walking through the airport, and this guy starts pointing at me. And he goes, "Hey!" And I go, "Oh, good, I'm back home. People know who I am." He said, "Anybody ever tell you you look just like Rece Davis?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, happens all the time." He looked at me and goes, "Boy, I bet that pisses you off, huh?" No, but I'm glad to be back here with you again. I see some of my friends from college sitting down the front row. I've never quite met anybody like my friend Johnny Hill, who's sitting here on the front. I hope to have that same luck in the future, too. Oh, a little zinger that they missed there, Johnny. Okay. But thank you for coming out. I think one of the things that people ask me when they hear where I came from, that I came from Alabama and made it to ESPN, how did you get there? That is a very long and complicated answer. I can tell you without question that I would not be here if I hadn't had the foundation that I got here at the university. I had tremendous teachers, had people who were very adept at helping you grow in your goals and in terms of trying to pursue what you wanted to achieve. Guys like Jim Oakley at the School of Communication. When I was here, there was a professor named Karen Carty, who was instrumental. Dr. Huttenstein, I think Jeremy Butler and Gary Copeland, Daniel Reif, who is at the University of North Carolina now, I think, teaching journalism. All of these guys had profound impacts on my time at Alabama and giving me a foundation to pursue what I wanted to do. But I'm not sure that anyone had quite the impact on me at Alabama that an English professor did, a guy by the name of Dr. Noble. I believe his first name was Dan Noble, and I believe he was an English professor of some renown. Loved his class, had an American literature class that was just fantastic, and I wrote a paper in the class one time, and I guess I must have done pretty well because at the end of class one day he said, "Davis, I want you to come by my office and see me tomorrow." And I said, "Yes, sir, I'll be there. What time?" And he told me. So I didn't know what I'd done. I was sitting there thinking, I know I didn't plagiarize. Like I said, I thought I got a good grade. I think I'm good here. So I'm sort of nervous, and you knock on the door and walk into his office, and he said to me, "You wrote a nice paper there," and he said, "It just made me start thinking, what do you want to do with your life?" And I looked at him and I said, "I'm going to be a sports broadcaster." And he looked at me and his face fell. And he said, oh, God." He said, "You don't want to spend your life going to the Bessemer Little League banquet, do you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, if I can cover Alabama football too." And I think at the time that it was an example to me that not everybody is going to share what your vision is. Not everybody's going to believe that you can reach the level that you want to reach. And there were plenty of people when I started out that told me, "You'll never make it to ESPN." The guys who are on ESPN, who are on the networks, who are at the big stations in big cities, they're all from New York. They're all from Los Angeles or Chicago. They went to school at Syracuse or Northwestern. They didn't come from a state university. You can't do that. I had a guy in Florence, Alabama, in my hometown, who told me when I was just starting in my career, "I know you didn't ask me, but you ought to find something else to do for a living." I had people. Tom Roberts, my good friend Tom Roberts, wouldn't even hire me in Birmingham. I was stuck in Columbus, Georgia, couldn't get out. And by the way, don't make absolute statements. I was in Columbus, Georgia for 5 years, and it was a very frustrating time because the station was not good. For a while, Malcolm Glazer, who owns the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, owned the station, and I can't understand how he could afford a football team and couldn't afford to buy us a news car, but it's the way it goes, I guess. I have a hard time rooting for the Bucs even to this day because of that. When Mark Barron was drafted by the Bucs, I was like, oh, not the Bucs. But you know, I was at this place and I couldn't get out, and I continued to send tapes, and you know, it becomes very frustrating, and people tell you you're not going to make it, and everybody has a different opinion of why. You know, you sound too much like you're from the South. You're too this, you're too that, you're too tall, you're too short, your hair's too brown, your hair's too gray, whatever it is, you know. And what you learn through that process is that you have to embrace who you are. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got came from a guy that probably none of you guys would even know who he was. When I was working in Flint, Michigan, there was an old school news anchor at a station in Detroit. And his name was Billy Bonds. And he was an old guy, and I watched him on TV one night, and he was reading something off the teleprompter, and he had an itch in his back. And instead of doing what most of us would do, you know, sort of start doing this or just try to hold it until the tape rolled, Bill just leaned into the desk, kept talking, never missed a beat, and just started scratching his back. And so I asked him about it once, and he said, kid, let me tell you. He said, nobody can be who they are on TV. He said, but everybody has to be a slightly exaggerated version of who you are on TV. Because if you try to fake it, they're going to know it. And I've tried to remember that throughout my career. You fall into traps from time to time. Certainly when I started at ESPN, I did. You always want to be the guy with the next catchphrase or the guy who's the funniest or whatever it might be. But you've got to stay in your lane. There's a great story about I think it's Kevin Hart, the comedian, and another comedian was asking him, you know, I want to broaden my repertoire. All I'm known for is I'm the guy who goes to the roast and cuts people into pieces. I want to be broader as a comedian. And he looked at him and said, dude, stay in your lane. So that would be one of the best things that I could tell those of you who aspire to be in journalism or in broadcasting on any level. Stay in your lane. That does not mean expand your horizons. It just means don't try to be somebody that you aren't. It'll tell on you on TV.